Chapter 231 to 232. As the Wind Daimyo stood up and announced the beginning of the main part of the meeting, the whole hall became completely silent, waiting for him to proceed. As is customary, we will begin with the contract for the import of rice. The daimyo glanced at Kuroto, who almost preened. Anyone who is interested may speak now, or be quiet for the next 5 years. And for a moment, nobody did. Everybody knew who would most likely win the deal for the import of rice. Only the Hasegawa family had considerable tax exemptions on several food products, including rice. Worse yet, Hasegawa sponsored Karanokyo, who was the representative of the country of rice, the most agricultural country on the continent. It was widely known the amount of rice they could supply would dwarf anyone else's proposition. Because of that, Hasegawa could ask for quite a high price for the import of rice, and even if somebody offered a cheaper alternative, they wouldn't win the contract for the simple reason that Kyo could provide rice in much greater amounts and of superior quality than anybody else. Rice was far too important for the wind country. It was easily stored and moved, and yet could be easily imported in huge quantities while lasting an incredibly long time. It was the staple food of the whole country, so as long as the price was not extremely exaggerated, the deciding factor for the daimyo was how much the provider can actually import. Everybody knew that, and so, with all the benefits, tax exemptions and whatnot, the deal was a literal goldmine that nobody could hope to challenge. Kuroto smugly stood in a leisure manner when everybody stayed silent and beamed at the Wind Daimyo. Since it seems nobody is actually concerned with the well-being of the people, I, Hasegawa Kuroto, would like to offer my humble service. I am sure that my family's contact with the rice country, Karanokyo, will be delighted to broker a deal between our two nations. I just hope we can settle on a deal beneficial for all the concerned parties. He finished with a light smile. The Wind Daimyo nodded, looking completely unamused. The bastard basically subtly told him the previous deal, and imports of rice would continue only if he gave some additional concessions to the Hasegawa family. Considering nobody else actually offered an alternative, the daimyo didn't have even a flimsy excuse to refuse. He simply could not refuse. Between all the bribed ministers, blackmail, no other alternative, and the fact that in the previous 5 years, somebody was sabotaging most caravans importing rice that is not from the rice country. Fucking Rasa, that damn no-good piece of trash. 5 years and he, a person in charge of an entire village of ninjas, can't figure out who is attacking the food merchants. Bullshit. I am sure the rice prick has some kind of deal with that bastard. The daimyo wistfully thought while inwardly sighing. He was sick of having to employ ninjas from other countries as guards for important things because, obviously, Rasa was not as loyal as his position would suggest. Yes, the Wind Daimyo knew that Suna was suffering extreme financial problems since he and Rasa started silently feuding. That, however, didn't mean Rasa could just go behind his back and make deals that would in the long run hurt his country. If only the blasted fool realized that. I might hate him beyond all reason, but Suna is my freaking main war deterrent. Yet I can't even make use of them because of an arrogant twit who wants to play political games and then dump all the blame at my feet, saying the Suna villagers suffer because I refuse to play nice with him. The daimyo started to get a bit irritated and decided to squash these thoughts as he turned towards the silent hall. With one twitch of his lips, he decided to follow the protocol and give one last customary question in the usual self-assured tone. I ask for the last time, is there anyone else in attendance who would like to compete for the benefits of the main provider of rice for the wind country? His hopes plummeted as nobody said anything. The daimyo knew it wasn't that nobody wanted the position. It was simply that nobody thought they could win. And even if they did win, they would be disadvantaged. It simply wasn't a good deal. Most of the biggest rice suppliers already withdrew from the country anyway because of the rice shipment raids as of late. Well, I tried, but I spotted the problems with the other rice imports far too late to do anything substantial before this meeting. Guess I will simply have to gift another 5-year-long license to Hasegawa's and spend more time trying to drive this filth away from my country in the following 5 years. I wonder if I should start employing Konoha or Iwa ninjas for that. Realizing the people are waiting for him, he spoke, hating how gleeful Kuroto Hasegawa looked. In that case, the deal goes to Has. The people grew confused as the daimyo cut himself in the middle of the sentence. Not long after that, their attention was drawn to the clanging sound of footsteps. Turning their heads, they saw the reason for the unexpected distraction. A woman was walking closer towards the front of the hall, her steps echoing with confidence and purpose. The daimyo couldn't believe his eyes as he stared at the woman in wonder and felt as if a lump blocked his throat, preventing him from speaking. The only thing he managed to choke out was a quiet disbelieving "Pakura?" The woman to whom he owed his life and the safety of his country, the hero of the Third Ninja War, was alive. As the daimyo was looking at the people in the hall for somebody wanting to fight Hasegawa's for the rice deal, Pakura kissed Rei one last time. "I guess that's my cue. Wish me luck." Rei simply nodded, supportively squeezing her hand before letting go with a whimsical smirk on his face. "Give 'em hell, dear." Pakura chuckled before silently standing up and starting to raise her path towards the front of the hall, weaving through the guests, attracting a lot of attention the closer she got. Finally, the daimyo spotted her, and Pakura had to stifle the urge to snicker at his baffled expression when she stopped a respectable distance before the elevated platform and slightly bowed her head in a show of respect, ignoring the gasp of surprise from the right side of the hall where Rasa sat. "I am Pakura, the representative of the Uzushio Trading Company." That elicited more surprised gasps from the audience and even a hopeful widening of the daimyo's eyes. "We recently decided to branch out," she nonchalantly shrugged. "As such, we would like to compete for the rice import agreement against the Hasegawa family. May the better supplier win." With an amused and somewhat mocking smirk, she looked at Kyo and Kuroto, who looked as if they ate a lemon. The Uzushio Trading Company may have started operating only recently, but everyone in the hall suddenly grew restless as they realized the most important thing. How in the hell were they supposed to compete against one of the richest international superpowers once it started encroaching on their business field? Just like that, the hall descended into mayhem. "I object." An angry snarl broke everyone from their reverie. "She is a rogue ninja. She should be detained." Pakura turned to the right as one of her eyebrows rose upward in a completely unamused fashion while her eyes landed on Rasa, who was standing up, preparing to attack. "If I remember correctly, in the documentation of the Sunagakure, I am a dead ninja, not a rogue one," Pakura replied in a cold tone. "After all, you did send me on a suicide mission and then wrote me off as an unfortunate casualty. It's not my problem that I survived your blatant attempt at sacrificing me because I was your strongest political opponent." She sneered, stopping Rasa in his tracks, his eyes worriedly glancing at the daimyo, who now listened with quite intense interest, angrily narrowing his eyes at what he just heard. Unimpressed, Pakura simply continued, "Don't worry, Rasa. This convention would last for a few days. I'm sure we can make time with the daimyo to discuss why exactly you so stupidly broke one of the very few laws that still apply to the KasiCair." In the back of the hall, Rei smirked. He couldn't wait to see that conversation. After all, any Kage was exempt from many laws of the land. That, however, didn't mean they could do whatever they wished. There were still a few laws they had to abide by. Not willfully sending ninjas to their death without a good reason or a good benefit showing for it was one of them. Unfortunately for Rasa, an attempt to kill one of the biggest threats to him keeping the position of KasiCair was not a good enough reason. Normally, Rasa would face no repercussions, no matter what he did, but right now, they were in front of the only man who was figuratively speaking higher than him in the political pecking order. Having Pakura reveal this little incident in front of the man, well, staring at the angry but silent Rasa as he stupidly stood, confused about what he should do, Pakura deemed he didn't have anything more to say and turned back towards the Wind Daimyo. I think we should get back to discussing the reason why we gathered here today before the rude interruption. She then retrieved a document from her pocket and gestured for a nearby servant to take it and bring it to the daimyo, since she couldn't approach closer due to the rules. That is our offer. I am sure you will find it more than generous. Everyone stared in silence, eagerly awaiting Daimyo's response while he took the document from his servant and started to read it. Only Kuroto Hasegawa and Karano Kyo stared in star-struck disbelief that somebody indeed dared to try competing against them. The same disbelief started to slowly morph into a foreboding sense of dread the more the daimyo's lips started widening into a smile as he read Pakura's offer. They obviously knew that the Wind Daimyo wasn't pleased with them having the contract for rice imports. Seeing the same man smiling as if Christmas came sooner than he expected when a counteroffer was provided. Yeah, they really didn't like what they were currently witnessing. Finally done with the document, the Wind Daimyo softly chuckled, and his eyes landed on the leisure form of Pakura as she indifferently stood in front of him. The daimyo couldn't help but appreciate the sight of her, both her physical beauty, for which he so relentlessly sent offer after offer to her a few years prior, and the fact she yet again pulled him out of a dastardly hard situation. Saving me from trouble again, huh? The daimyo pursed his lips in amusement and averted his gaze towards the crowd. Anyone else wishes to participate in the competition for the rice import contract for the Wind Country between the Uzushio Trading Company and the Hasegawa family sponsoring the Rice Country representative? He firmly asked, and waited for a few seconds. When nobody reacted, the daimyo smiled. In that case, I declare the Uzushio Trading Company winner. Pakura knowingly smirked. Karano Kyo gritted his teeth, thinking about how to mitigate this disaster. He knew returning to his master with the message that the money flow from the Wind Country would stop would earn him some very painful moments as a test subject for his master's scientific endeavors. Unlike Karano, who took the declaration with calmness, Kuroto Hasegawa turned red and only barely managed to keep his voice in line. At He took several calming breaths, remembering that yelling at the daimyo would most likely not help his case. May I ask why we lost? The daimyo looked at him and nodded. Naturally, that is your right. He passed the document to a servant who took it towards Kuroto. As you can read from the official offer from the Uzushio Trading Company, they offered 10 times the amount of rice you provided in the last 5 years, for half of the price you asked for. He informed Kuroto with unusual, barely veiled, giddy amusement. Therefore, by the rules of this convention, the contract goes to them. It was a complete truth, too. Pakura's offer was exactly half of the price and exactly 10 times the size of what Karano offered through the Hasegawa family. Only an idiot wouldn't notice that simple fact and what it meant. Pakura must have known weeks before the start of the convention what figures would Karano and Hasegawa try to push for in order to reach such a result. There must have been a rat, Kuroto realized as he clutched the document, frantically reading it. His most lucrative business was just stolen and he could not contest it. If it was just a bit more than their offer, he could do it. But there was no way they could cover 10 times the currently promised amount of rice. He was screwed, and he knew it. Pakura smirked at the face he was making. Clearly, they didn't meet Conan yet, as if there was information she couldn't acquire with a reasonable amount of effort. But How can they produce so much? It is obviously a sham. Uzu Island doesn't even have sufficient space for so much farming, Kuroto screamed, causing others to start muttering. It has to be said, the amount of rice Karano imported from the rice country was massive. It might not have been enough for the whole of the wind country, but it easily covered 20% of its consumption alone. 10 times that. It was a bit unbelievable. Pakura just snorted at the blatant accusation. Our farms were created by partnering with the Biri Biri Company. Their space expansion seals are quite handy for farming on limited space. You are also forgetting that the Uzumaki clan are masters at sealing arts. We can produce a lot more than what we offered to the Wind Country. It's just that the Wind Country doesn't need more than the currently offered amount. Pakura then sharply turned towards the seated guests. By all means, if you are interested in buying more rice or other kind of crops, contact the Uzushio Trading Company. Pakura was very aware that many representatives of various countries were present at this event. It wouldn't hurt to make a free advertisement like this, no? And with that, she turned back towards the daimyo, slightly bowed before leaving back towards her seat at the far end of the hall. Well then, let's move on. Daimyo's eyes twinkled with amusement. Since our staple food is already covered, the next item discussed is the import of Tuning out the daimyo and ignoring the various stares, Pakura finally reached her seat and sat down next to Rei, snuggling into his side. Well, that was fairly easy. At least one of our goals is finished. With this, our other goals will be a lot easier to achieve, she contently whispered. For them, the convention that would drag on for a few weeks yet already ended. There was no real reason to take a bigger chunk of the import contracts after acquiring the one for rice. It's not as if they did all that for money. Don't let anybody say there is a better way to control a country than to provide what they need most. Rei agreed, gently kissing her cheek. Next target. Rasa. They both giddily chorused together. It was time to start rocking the boat called the Wind Country at its core.